All right. Well, hello and welcome to our next edition of the Higher Education Leadership Series. Today I am joined by uh, Dr. Richard Liedtke, and he serves as AVP of Enrollment Management here at Tarleton State University, and I'm so glad to be with you today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Edwards. Appreciate it.
No problem. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I started in higher education as a college basketball coach 31 years ago today. Well, not today, but 31 years ago this year. So I've been in higher ed for 31 years. That's been my entire career. As I said, I started out with coaching. I was on the men's basketball. Got in it because of my recruitment skills, and the coach says, "We need you recruiting for us," and that's what got me started. And finished my career down in Austin, Texas at Concordia University at Austin as a women's basketball coach, and then got into administration. I had previous experience with recruitment. It married well with admissions work. So when you work at small NAIA schools or Division III schools, you end up wearing multiple hats. And so I got involved with admissions and recruitment work through admissions as well as athletics. And that just blossomed. When I gave up athletics, I went into administration and started learning about administrative roles, and then from enrollment services, then blossomed into enrollment management. So from coaching to admission to services to management over those years. And I've been at 5 different institutions now. So I've had the opportunity to work at a private school. I've had two independent institutions, as well as then now this is my first NCAA Division I, getting to that large. Been at public institutions, private institutions, small, and now large. So I've completed what I feel like I've completed my full circle, other than going, I guess, to a research Division I type institution. And I'm not sure I necessarily want to do that. So
Well, we're on our way to becoming that anyway, so you just stick around long enough, you'll get that too.
right. Yeah.
So you kind of already answered my first question about roles that you had before this one. So what are some of the responsibilities of your current role?
Currently, I am directly responsible for our P16 program, which is a partnership we have with high schools throughout Texas. We've got about 330-ish high schools in that program. Always looking to grow more. We're getting ready to travel here at the end of this month, here a couple of weeks from now, and then in October to go out to Austin and Houston and start working on more high school partnerships in there. And that just allows for a better partner, a stronger partnership with the high school, but it gives the top 50% automatic admissions into Tarleton. Gives them a higher a higher scholarship than the normal scholarship, what we call a kicker on top of it. So, and then it gives the counselors at the high schools a liaison directly here on campus to work with them if they have any questions. They don't have to dial up and play phone tag. They've got a direct line to a P16 coordinator. And then I'm also in charge of working on reentry students. And those are students who have been at Tarleton and for whatever reason have left, and trying to get them back on their path to the journey to an educational degree. So whatever has ended up on their plate to take them away from education, we've got a person in who is trying to do outreach and see what we can do to give them resources and help them get back on the fold of completing that degree. So those are the 2 things I'm directly involved in. And then I always say, whatever Garza doesn't want to do, he gets to me. So Dr. Garza, that's not true. I help support him in just enrollment management thoughts and projects. Like right now, I'm doing a FAFSA communications task force because of the changes that are going on at FAFSA. We've got a task force developed to try and develop our communications and be prepared to push things out here in October. And so doing different projects like that allows him then to focus more on the larger picture, and I can take care of some of those smaller details and more timely or timeline wise, taking up more of the time during a busy day or whatever.
That makes sense. I mean, especially with the readmission piece, with my administrative role with Tarleton Online, we help a lot of students who get, like you said, started and are ready to come back. And fortunately, we have degree completion pathways for folks to finish online or at one of our campuses. And so, but I'm glad that we have that in place because it does become kind of a one-stop shop for those students and kind of, makes it easier for them. So.
Well, and that's the beauty of what Amy works with. She's got the tools to help a student. If she can get in contact with them, then it's a matter of figuring out what's best for that student. And so with all the resources that we have between Fort Worth, Waco, Rellis, online, and Stephenville, she can listen to the student and understand what the student's needing, or at least what they're asking for, and saying, okay, here's some options for you, versus trying to cram one option at them and saying this is the way you have to do it. They've got some flexibility to maneuver and try and figure out the best pathway.
So if someone is not in enrollment management, but they need to understand it better, like if there are certain basic concepts of maybe the admissions process, or, just are there certain basic things that they should understand?
Yeah, because most people don't grow up saying, I want to be an enrollment management VP or a director of enrollment management. Most people, it's like, what is enrollment management? And so the way I like to think about it, you got to think of it holistically, because some enrollment managers get focused way over on the recruitment side and forget about the retention side of it. And if you go out there and you just go out there and recruit students, just keep bringing students in, and if you're bringing the wrong student in, then they're just leading out the back door just as fast. And so as an enrollment manager, we're looking at it what I call holistically, and I sit here with full circle, because you think about what you're bringing into the institution. I always say that enrollment management is the first ask. So development leaders probably don't like when I say that, but development leaders go out and ask different organizations and different alumni for contributions and donations back to the university. And I'd say that starts from the very beginning. When you start with your admissions folks out there and your recruitment folks, they're asking families and individuals to invest somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 in Stephen or in Tarleton or whatever university that you're working with. And so to me, it's important that you're looking at that from that perspective, because you're not only bringing the student in for an education, but you have a lifetime journey with that student. As they go through your university, they get their degree, they go on into their career. Hopefully they do great things in their career that shines a light back on the university. And at some point they're fortunate enough that they can give back to the university that paved the path for them to get to where they were. And by that, others have paved that path for them by donations throughout. So that's why I look at it as a full circle of making sure that you're focused on holistic student in the student opportunities throughout the educational journey, and then the lifetime journey they have tied back to the education. So when I first got into it, I think just the recruitment background in me, I wanted to be focused. Okay, we're recruitment. That's what we do. But when you look at most enrollment management positions, they vary from organizational structure, and really organizational structure doesn't matter as much as being able to cross paths and collaborate with different units on campus. But you'll see that even within whatever EM organization it is, whether it's financial aid, admissions, registrar, recruitment, or if registrar, like here, I know registrar is over in the academic affairs area, but it's about working relationships. And I would say overall in enrollment management, it is nothing. The most important part of it, I guess, is building those relationships. You build relationships with families and students, recruiting, but you also build relationships on campus. And so that you're forging those relationships to give that student its the best experience possible in their introduction to and their movement through the university. You're muted.
It makes sense. You talk a lot about the student life cycle and where people are in the process, but also the best fit students, because we want to make sure that we bring the students who are going to be most successful, and that we, but also in terms of the way we recruit and the way we market, that we explain to students what the experience is going to be like, so that the right type of student finds us and and also that student gets prepared for what they're going to experience here. I guess since you're a basketball coach, I mean, it kind of reminds me of just, if you play for, or if you're looking at where you're going to go to school and you're a great isolation basketball player, and the coach that's recruiting you, is more of a move without the ball, and a lot of plays, that might not be the best fit for you as a player, unless you're willing to grow. But I do think that the way that you, like you said, just like a good coach doesn't just recruit the player, recruits the family, and explains to them why this is the right school for them. So yeah, I think there's a lot. I think your background, it really helps you a lot in this role.
Yeah. Well, and you're so right. I know there's a lot of presidents that I've worked for that hate when I say it's all about fit, because they want you to go out there. You just need to recruit that student. You just need to sell them on this institution. Well, I used the example one time and I use this forever. I was at a school in Nebraska recruiting against a college that was just 30 minutes south of us. And they were nationally known. At that time, Steinmeier had them going national Final Fours and everything else. And this young lady could have come to us and maybe not played immediately, but she would have gotten playing time fairly soon and would have been in the starting lineup much quicker than the other place. And she would have sat on the bench there for at least a year. And I remember her telling me the reason she selected, not because it was a national program or she loved the coach or they ran the type of basketball she was going to need. It was because the trees on campus. I'm like, I'll plant trees. And it's like, no, you just can't make that fit. So, and
Right.
it's a lot, you'll hear students, no matter what campus I'm on, when they say they've selected, it just felt right. It's felt like whatever, family, or it just felt like home, whatever that is, it felt right for them in that fit. You can have the #1 program in the nation, but if your campus doesn't feel right, then you're not going to get that person, whether it's a great program or not, whether it's athletics or academics. It's got to be a good fit.
Makes sense. So, we talked about, the different parts of enrollment management. What are some of the big challenges facing enrollment management today?
Today, I can give you a few of them. One is the waning confidence of our society in higher education. Well, with the economy the way it is, you've got high school students that can go out and make $15 an hour. And I know that sounds it sounds great when you're 18, but then when you start getting bills and trying to make a livelihood, that's difficult. And unfortunately, when that 18-year-old figures that out, they're probably somewhere in their mid-20s and needing to come back and get an education, but yet their plate is so full, they're trying to figure out how to fit it in. But we've got the waning confidence in higher education, and part of that's our fault. I don't say Tarleton individually, but higher ed in itself, in that we have, we've stood on top of the hills for so long, and this is higher ed, and this is the way it's got to be. And we haven't flexed as much as we probably should have or should be doing. And I think we're being challenged to show some of that flexibility at this point. And so I think it's not going to change higher education in its entirety, but I think higher education is going to have to change a little bit to work with society, and I say that more corporations and management businesses, and that to be able to put the product out there and meeting the student so that they can contribute without going through a college education and now let us have to train you again on what we need you to do. We should be workforce ready as we go forward. And when I say we, I'm looking at higher education in its entirety. And when I say workforce, I know there's different terminologies there, but when a student walks off your campus with their degree, certainly they don't have the experience of the job, but they should have the knowledge and know how to step into that position and be able to do the job. Sometimes I'm not sure that we've done a good enough job. And again, higher ed in general, a good enough job of putting that person in that place. So that's one. Two, the lack of funding coming from the state. If you will look at tuition, everybody focuses on tuition, but you've got to look at the funding. And as state funds go down, tuition goes up. But it's not as simple as if the state says we're going to cut your budget by 3%, it's not as simple as saying, oh, we'll just raise tuition 3%, because the numbers don't match up. So when you have a $1 million budget, and I know it's more than that, could be 80, 100, $120 million budget, you start cutting that 3%. Well, you've got a institution of 15,000 students that sells so many credit hours. How many more credit hours do we have to sell, or what percentage of tuition do we have to raise to make up for that difference? Because there's no other way. There are a few ways, but that's the main resource that we have for funding is our tuition dollars as the state dwindles. It used to be the state was number one, and it's dwindled. And so I'll use the example of 3%. That may mean you have to go up 5% just to break even. And that's just breaking even, but yet we're expected to grow as an institution. We're expected to provide better resources. We're expected to give you state of the art in the classroom, facilities, whatever it is. And so now it's like, okay, well, that's breaking even. What do we need to do? 6-7% to try and get to those facilities, to get to those experiences. And so it makes it challenging in this day because tuition is going up. It's starting to outprice students and opportunity and access to higher education. And so that becomes a challenge for us of trying to hold that tuition down, but at the same time, provide the opportunities, provide the experience, and provide the quality of education that's needed to do just what I talked about before, and putting people out there ready to be in the workforce. And so financing college is a challenge. And then lastly, I would tell you, because again, goes back to the financing, the challenge we're finding with targeting, I won't say targeting, that's not a very good word to use. Trying to understand the different populations of students that we serve. So in higher education and enrollment management, it's easy to say we got freshmen, we've got transfers, we've got adult students, and in adult students, there's several different categories. There could be master's or postdoc, or of course post bachelor's degree programs, whether it's master's or doctorate. It could be degree completion. It could be adding on credentials, or I like to think about micro credentials. If maybe I'm a business major and I want to pick up some advertising, I don't want to go back to school and pick up 18 hours so I can add a minor in advertising, but maybe I want 9 to 12 hours that give me a concentration or something like that. So I think we've got to be flexible to those kinds of things when we talk about the adult program. But we've got different markets that we have to navigate, and some of those markets are shrinking, like the first-time freshmen. The 2026, we're going to see what people are calling a cliff. I'm not certain that it's going to be a cliff necessarily. There could be flattening here in Texas. I believe it's a flattening, maybe slightly down, but I think the biggest part of that group is that the demographic shift that's happening. And it's just about numbers. And I don't know the exact numbers here in Texas, but let's take a white population that shrinks over the next 8 years, 7-8 years, it shrinks 10%. And take all non-white populations over the next 8 to 10 years, and it grows 15%. Where the natural business person will just go after all the non-white categories, and you'll be just fine. The numbers aren't the same, so you may be losing, just using round figures, we're very low. Let's say you're losing 10,000 students in this category at 10%, but this category at 14%, you're gaining 7,000 students. So you're still, the pool is shrinking. Whether we like it or not, the pool is shrinking. Now, I think the difference why I believe it's not going to be as much of a cliff is I think that COVID has taught secondary education on how to wrap better resources around all their students to help them succeed. So I believe, this is just a theory I'm going on, through that process of trying to help students succeed during COVID, they realize they've got more tools in the shed to help students succeed. And I think going post-COVID, we're going to start seeing higher graduation rates or slightly elevated graduation rates, which I hope will keep that cliff to a minimum, maybe a slight dip to flat is my hope. I'm not a I don't know what they call those people that do that.
Prognosticator, you know.
I don't do those kinds of studies, so
Right.
it's just my observation is seeing what when I watched high schools do everything they could to get students across the finish line during COVID and realizing, oh, we can do this in more ways than what we've done in the past. I think some of that, just like in higher ed, we're carrying some of that forward, and it's only going to help our students. So I think those are the three big things that are impacting higher ed today. It's the the shift of students, and I haven't even talked to transfer students. I go through each category. I'm sorry, we only probably have a half hour here, but this is what I do. Transfer students are shrinking for most institutions. It's interesting because nationally, the data tells us that 25% of the students that go to a 2-year institution, only 25%, approximately 25% go on to a 4-year institution. And so when we see that the community college is shrinking and only 25% of those students are actually going on, community colleges' roles have changed as well in trying to meet the needs of what's in the community, and not necessarily meaning that just because you go to a community college doesn't mean that you're going to transfer then to a 4-year university that you're moving. And so, and then as the adult population, we have that to me is the largest population of students that we have right now that are being underserved. We have my generation right now, 1/3 has a degree, 1/3 has some college experience, and 1/3 no college whatsoever. So there's 2/3 of that population that could use an education. Then you fast forward to the millennials and fast forward to the Gen Z and keep on going. I think they're calling them Gen P now with the pandemic. So they've gotten a couple of terms there, but the adult education is one of the larger markets right now that it is not being served, in my opinion, not being served well, because again, we try and cram the square peg in the round hole and say, you adults have to do it this way. I challenge us in higher education to think differently on how we serve those folks. And I always use the example of, I can't remember what college it is out east. It's either Colgate or I can't think of another C. It's a C, but they do 4-week courses, or what you want to call them modules. And so you focus on one class every 4 weeks. And a lot of times with adults, we try and tell them, oh, you can take 8-week courses. We've done this. We got so flexible. We're doing this 8-week course for you, but they can only take maybe 3 or 6 hours to handle the weight and the workload of that 8 weeks versus focus 4 weeks on one class. We'll get 12 done in the semester, 12 hours done in the semester. Now you're full-time financial aid. You're closer to reaching the finish line at a much faster pace than taking 3 to 6 hours every semester and it taking you the next 5 to 6 years to get done. And no adult that's been in college for 2-3 years wants to hear, oh yeah, we can get you to the finish line maybe 5 years from now. So I think we've got to be more dynamic and more flexible to how we provide that education to our students.
Well, the administrator of me is really excited to hear you say those things, because adult students is the population that I serve, and I would agree with you that we need a lot more flexibility in what we offer. I'm going to ask you this, since you do have a doctorate, I'm going to ask you a little bit about theory. So, what's your leadership philosophy, and, if there are any theories, whether it's situational or servant leadership or anything else, what kind of helps you build your philosophy of leadership?
I start with servant leadership. I believe strongly in serving others. If I can help in a way that's going to make somebody else better, that's what I want to do. But I would tell you, and I would tell students, you're going to find that you're going to pull from different leadership styles and different leadership theories. You talk about situational. I think it does come down to what you're dealing with. And at times, you're going to be a servant leadership. At other times, it's going to take a situational approach. Or I'm trying to think of all the different. It's been a day or two since I remember all the different theories. But I think in my opinion, I think a good leader kind of pulls from each one of those to strengthen and sharpen their tool to be the best leader they can, but know that sometimes they're going to move a little more to this direction, that leadership style for this situation, but then retract and move in this direction with the different situations that they're doing. But I like to start with servant leadership because I just believe I have a servant heart. That's part of why I got into education. I wanted to transform lives, and you know this with your degrees behind you and your doctorate that you're a different generation than previous generations before you or behind you, and so that education, I know for me, it's opened doors from coming from a farm family out in western Kansas to a doctorate, which my family would have never guessed when I said goodbye to the farm. They never guessed that. So I do believe that generations are transformed in ways we don't even know and can't even imagine. So I'm raising, I think, what's going to be a FBI agent and a doctor. And I can tell you that my grandparents before me would have never thought about that. So my grandfather having an eighth grade, not a degree, eighth grade education before he was put out on the farm to work full time. So you just, I don't know about you, but I think part of education is paying it forward. And so the next generation, you want them to be set and understand and value that education that you work so hard for, so they come at it in a different angle versus my family came into education is that's something you do through high school and then you go to work. And so try to provide that opportunity to transform lives. And that's, if anybody is looking at higher education and they're wanting to get in it for the pay, the excitement, whatever the reason is, I hope at the core of that is that you transform lives every day. Whether it's walking down a sidewalk, smiling and saying hello to somebody that you don't know that just may have flunked an algebra test and you just made their day, you transform lives every day. And that's why I try and tell our team and my directs is that they don't realize how much of a transformational player they are, but they need to understand every morning they get up, they're there to transform lives.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better. And you kind of lead into this next question. So how does communication impact your role? I mean, I think about enrollment management, there are probably a lot of opportunities with internal stakeholders as well as with external stakeholders to communicate. What are some examples?
You cannot be successful in this position without having good communication skills, whether it's written or verbal. Examples, going down here and meeting with city council, trying to figure out, they want to work on trying to develop downtown. And so we'll be able to go down there and visit with them and talk to them about what is needed. You know, they're trying to say, okay, from a university perspective, and as you work with your students, what do students need down here? If we build a pathway, okay, we can build this great pathway from Tarleton to downtown, and they can all walk downtown, and it's like they don't walk across campus, they're not walking downtown. But to be open and have those conversations, but it really comes down to being genuine, being honest in your approach. Certainly, there's going to be politics, and there's certain agendas there. But if you're genuine and you're coming through it with your honesty and working with data, I always believe in having data behind you to support. And so communication to me is key. And that's both off campus and on campus. I mean, you got a president here who is working tirelessly at the state building to try and get funding for us. And he wouldn't get that if he wasn't able to communicate with constituents and be able to help them understand where Tarleton is and tie their passions to what we're trying to accomplish here. And that goes well for us. And the same thing for an enrollment manager, you have your unit that you probably would communicate very well with, but if you can't communicate cross campus, then you'll never be successful as an enrollment manager, because it's not about your division. It's about all the pathways that you connect to your division. And I always like to use this example. I like analogies. When you throw a pebble into the pond, it starts the smallest ripple at the center at the pool. Enrollment management wraps around the university. There's not a pebble that can be thrown at a university into that pond that doesn't have a ripple effect back over to enrollment management. So if you don't have those open lines of communication working back and forth, then that wave that hits the shore becomes a tsunami on your unit. And if you have too many of those, your unit gets worn down, they get burned out, and then you start that turnover churn. So as an enrollment manager, one of the key things in talk about serving and serving an institution is building those relationships and keeping those lines of communication open both ways. You as a communicator out and what's happening with the unit, what we need, as well as what they need, and they need your unit to do. So, and that works on campus as well as.
And, I think we're in the middle as an institution in a strategic planning process and, implementing that plan, whether they're the institutional plan or whether it's your plan within enrollment management. What role does strategic planning play in your work as a leader?
A good question. A lot of people, I think of a strategic plan as a process, a thinking process, and an idea process. And once you're done, that book goes up on the shelf, and woo, we got that task completed. And I see strategic planning a little bit different. You spend certainly a great amount of time putting the plan together and thinking through that plan, but instead of putting it on the shelf, now it's time to massage the plan. Because I would challenge that if you put a 5-year plan together, 3 to 5 year plan, sometimes something's going to happen in there that changes direction. It could be funding, it could be priorities shift, or budgets get cut or whatever. And so to me, you should always be massaging your strategic plan every year going back. When I do my enrollment management as the chief enrollment officer, I'll have a retreat with my leadership every summer. And part of that leadership retreat is going back and reviewing the strategic plan, what we wanted to accomplish that year. Some things get accomplished, some things don't. But that's a time when you look at it and say, okay, those that did not get accomplished, do they get pushed to other years or additional years? Or is it something that it's no longer a priority and needs to drop off the radar? And so a strategic planning process is so important. If you don't do strategic planning and don't put it up on a shelf, if you do it that way, I think you're going to be successful. If you don't strategic plan, or you do it and you put it on a shelf, then to me it becomes tactics. And you're working with tactics. It's a day-to-day operation or a month-to-month operation. You're saying, okay, what do we need to do now? And the problem with tactics is it shifts, like shifting sand. You're constantly shifting, and you're going to wear your staff out. Because today it's go 100 miles an hour in this direction. 2 days later, okay, stop. We're going to go 100 miles. It's like we just got our feet underneath of us, and you're now telling us to go a different direction. So that's where the strategic planning comes in, and it's in its word, strategic. It's a strategy to help get you long term through to a place that you want to be. I'll use it like a roadmap. You want to go from A to B. We're going to go out here to Los Angeles. Okay, how many hours is it going to take? How many stops is it going to take? Where do I want to stop for eating? Where do I want to stop for spending the night somewhere because I can't get there straight? You start to strategize how you're going to get out versus we're just going to jump in the car and go. We'll figure it out as we go. That can be frustrating because you may end up in Seattle because you didn't look at a roadmap to how to get to LA. So strategic planning, I'll quit rambling here, but strategic planning is a very, very important process of any leader in enrollment management.
Thank you. So I think most people, when they want to be a leader, they think about the fun parts, and there's obviously you get to do exciting things and start new initiatives, and you get to be a part of interesting meetings, and but sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you have to have hard conversations with people. What's your approach to having difficult conversations as a leader?
I'll go back to being genuine and caring for the individual. It doesn't do you any good to ignore a difficult situation. Some young leaders want to, as they engage in a difficult situation, they want to kind of side skirt it. We'll go by. We'll see how it goes. Versus hitting it head on, embracing it, not from a fault point of view, but how can I help you succeed? And so if it's a difficult situation with personnel, and I'll tell you, a lot of what leaders do is spend a lot of time on personnel and managing personnel. And if you start with caring for the individual, supporting the individual, I always like to think of an individual having a toolbox. What tools can I give you so that you can be successful? And those tools aren't going to be the same for every individual. And so if I spend my time focused on developing the tools and finding the tools to help you be the most successful, that's where I get back to that servant leadership. I'm trying to find everything I can to help you be as successful. But there's going to be times when you provide the tools and they're just not using it. And so you have to have those difficult conversations, not from a blame or fault position, but from how can I help you be successful? And through those conversations, there come situations and times where no matter what you do, no matter what tools you give, you understand that the situation is going to change and they're not going to be successful. And then that's when you have the hard alternatives of unfortunately letting somebody go or trying to find them a pathway somewhere else that is not necessarily within your community. So, but to ignore the situation and not deal with it becomes a festering problem for leaders. Whether it's on, again, I go back to my coaching background, it's the same thing, whether it's on the team in athletics or whether it's on a team in enrollment management. If you got somebody that is unhappy, doesn't like what they're doing, and you can't give them the proper tools to be successful, then you need to find an alternative form to get out of it. And don't circumvent the issue. You got to hit it head on and deal with it, but not, I must say this again to reiterate, not from a blame or a fault, but from a support and how can I help?
Well, I think that helps you, and you're showing your authenticity, and I think it builds rapport, and people can take it because they know where you're coming from. Um, you mentioned earlier there's, not you couldn't really throw a rock at the university and not somehow touch or have an impact on enrollment management. What are some examples of ways you work across divisions with other higher education leaders?
Yeah, well, being new here in April, I've been around to all the deans, just sit down and again, just kind of a open dialogue to find out what it is they're doing, what we can do to help support. I give an example of engineering, Dean Landetta over there, creating a symposium where his students are putting poster boards out in the hallways and showing their work and coming over to an open house and seeing what the projects were that his students were working on. Not only did he do that for the internal group here on campus, but then he invited high schools in. So, okay, how can we work to get you more high schoolers to that event so they can see the projects that you're doing, and more of those budding engineers out there in the high school will think of Tarleton as an opportunity. And so just meeting with athletics last week, talking to them and saying, how can we collaborate? Sitting down at the table and understanding where they have frustrations, where recruitment's easy for them, and then where recruitment's challenging for them, and how can we support that and help them in those challenges and make it easier for them. So it's across campus. Again, I've been to every dean, I've been to not every coach, but I went to the coaches meeting to meet every coach, and those coaches that want to sit down, then we do. And then I've been to every major unit on campus as well, just to find out, dialogue, and get to know the individual better, get to know their unit better, and then ways that we can collaborate and ways that we can work together. I'll give you an example, just off of one idea, just a thought process. I had a young lady who decided to think about what could we do if we brought a trio group in here, to the point that came to a full discussion, reaching out to the trio program and having our first trio event here, trio recruitment event here on our campus this Saturday. And so we'll see if it's success, and hopefully it's a modicum of success that we can see grow into the future and develop it. So it was through conversations, open conversations, that allowed for that kind of dialogue to take place and ideas to start landing. I always say plant seeds around campus and see how they grow. And so that's the key, is as you go out there as an enrollment manager, trust your team trust your direct reports to run your division. That's what they're there for. That's what you hired them to do. You're, in my opinion, as an enrollment manager, your job is to build those bridges across campus to make those tools come in and help those folks be more successful in what they do.
Well, collaboration is key. I mean, it's if you're an island and you're probably not as effective as you could be. Um, so what would you like people to know about higher education leadership or your role that we haven't talked about today?
The one thing that I've not focused any on or said anything about is, I said a little bit, I guess, but not much, is the importance of data.
Mm.
As we go forward, especially in enrollment management, I don't know as there's probably a career or a pathway that you choose that isn't going to have some form of data attached to it. So it's important to don't sit back and say, "Oh, I'm no good at math, so I can't do that." You're going to have to be successful. You're going to have to be able to analyze data, to look at it, not only to see what the data tells you, but what it doesn't tell you. In some cases, it's the lack of something that helps you make that decision. But to me, the data is there. Don't get paralyzed by it and just overwhelmed by it. The data is there to help drive decisions. It doesn't make the decision. And so as an enrollment leader, to me, I want copious amounts of data, and sometimes in nausea, the amount of data that's out there. The institution itself, big resource of data. And so as you look at the institution, you start looking at your state, you look at national data, that helps you, it helps inform you to make better strategic decisions. Versus, again, if you're not using that data, you're not being strategic about what you're doing in your leadership and in the direction you're going, then it becomes more tactical. And to me, the difference between tactical and strategic is day-to-day operation versus long-term direction. And you don't want to be at a place where you're making day-to-day decisions and you don't have data to support it, because then you become tactical. It gets messy then.
It does. I think we're fortunate today that our data visualization tools are so good that, I think being able to understand and make sense and prioritize data, I think is probably easier today than it ever has been. Just with the tools that are out there. So I agree with you. Yeah, people shouldn't be afraid of the data.
And it can easily get overwhelming because the volume that is out there that you can gather up. And so it can be a daunting task. But once you understand the data you need to make those decisions, it just keeps pouring in for you. So to me, that's where I spend a lot of my time trying to develop reports and talking to the data specialists, because there's some analysis sometimes in statistical analysis that needs to be done so that you can be better informed in it. So I'm not the expert. I find the expert to do this kind of statistical analysis to help understand a phenomenon.
Yeah, the folks in institutional analytics are my friends. So I'll give them a shout out anytime I can. They help me all the time. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's been a great, anytime to get to talk about higher ed leadership is a great day, but it's been especially fun talking with you. And I just appreciate you making time for us, and hopefully we'll get to talk again sometime. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Edwards. All right.